Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities and Miniatures, and yeah, you guessed it, it's Friday, which means, well, it's time for more Obscurities in Literature. And I feel like, we've been off on a bit of a video game, tokusatsu, Super Sentai tangent, so obviously the best thing to do is take it in a more French direction. I don't know what I'm thinking. This book, this book's long out of print now and way more pricey than it has any right to be. And it's a shame because when I found out that Dark Horse was going to be publishing like The World of Adina and the Inside Moebius books, I was hoping beyond hope that we'd finally see Arzach back in print. So this isn't its first rodeo in English translations, and this one is getting pretty dated. Is there even a... I don't remember what year. And it's all nice and folded up. There we go. Maybe back here. I don't see a year. Well, at least 96. Okay, if we're going to have the Domu by Otomo Katsuhiro, I can't read today, preview. That came out 96. Let's say 95, 96-ish. I remember they did put this out in at least the Airtight Garage in this smaller format. Grabbing a traditional comic book just to give you a size comparison. Taking a moment to plug one of my absolute favorite comics as well, Kill 6 Billion Demons. So you can see here it is a little bit smaller. I don't know like the official sizing letter number. Just like grabbing some other books I had handy. It's about the size of the Relic Blade. Seeker's Handbook, if that's any indication. Very cool game. I don't know, just... Also 6 Billion Demons. This is a fun one too. Random books, games, and comics. Back to Moebius. So this blew my mind when I first stumbled upon it. I don't even know how that happened now. Obviously I'll blame heavy metal. But, I didn't start picking up heavy metal in the late 70s because I was barely just born. But I distinctly recall first finding out about Arzach, probably through, Wizard or Hero Illustrated or the Comics Journal or one of those type of, hoity-toity literary magazines from back in the day. But also, the local library had a VHS video series on comic creators or something like that. And I remember one volume in particular was all about the early Metal Hurlant guys and had a big thing on like Juan Jimenez and the Meta Barons. Had a big thing on Richard Corbin. Had a big thing on Moebius, mostly with, the Inkall. Maybe I should do a thing on the Inkall one day. But when I first saw this, just the idea that you could make a comic book, a comic strip, with no words and yet, trying to tell a story visually was just mind-blowing. Now, mind you, I hadn't ever stumbled across any manga or anything like that yet. And just the way everything was set up across the page, I thought was so interesting and exciting. And I remember doing my best to try and draw like Moebius, and obviously Jean Girard had many, many more years of experience drafting and composing beautifully illustrated pages in comparison to me. So, yeah. I remember I had a student years ago, and she was an interesting one because she was labeled as both special ed and gifted and talented. So I remember she was like twice blessed was one of the terms that they like to use for that. And this girl was an amazing artist in that she understood, and she came from a very impoverished family and had never really been exposed to comics like this. Comics in general, but that girl could put the most amazing compositions in terms of paneling, in terms of layout. And I remember she was whipping up stuff like this. And, she wasn't a good writer and she wasn't a good speller. So she would actually visually tell stories like this, and her sense of pacing was so similar. And I'm like, oh my God, this kid needs some serious comic education. I remember showing her some panels from some of Moebius's stories in this book, especially the earlier ones where there's literally no text at all. And her mind was just like blown. And I remember giving her some showing her Tezuka Osamu's stuff like from his Phoenix Saga, Hinotori, and some of the sections in there where there was no words. It's just the storytelling, the picture, and that girl, I could see that light bulb click, and she just kind of nodded her head. She didn't like to talk too much, and she just like, oh yeah. I'm like, you get this? She's just like, yeah. And that was one of the coolest moments. I mean, just seeing, at an early age like that, and obviously we kept the stuff that we were showing at school a lot more PG than some of these. Just some of the various compositions of how the page was set up was so neat. And it's not like the story, or stories I should say, make much sense. Not that they need to either. And just, the stippling, the cross-hatching, everything about this, the days before we had computers doing our work for us when it came to art. This double-page spread, oh my God, I don't know how many times. That's probably why this book is so bent out of shape, is just sitting here staring at the detail that Moebius was pouring into this. Now, mind you, I picked up this copy around 96 or so, like I said, based on the copyright date. But we did own a beat-up, raggedy copy of the old Epic illustrated versions of these books when they were first published way back when. So I can remember grabbing those, seeing those, first stumbling across those in the early 90s. And I'm assuming they're at my brother's place or at my parents' house. I haven't bothered to really look. I mean, everything, this is almost verbatim the same as the Epic illustrated versions. So if you have one, you don't need the other. But, Moebius's illustrations have always been impressive. And then, the one line of dialogue. And I can remember sitting there with my younger brother, not the Sparkle Child brother, the Japan brother, and just trying to brainstorm and just discussing this stuff. We were both so into that. And while he may have moved on a bit from the comic scene, I mean, he still has an appreciation for good art. I will give him credit for that. But yeah, I remember the two of us totally trying to ape on Moebius' style. And why would we not want to, Especially when we get into the black and white section. And just the color work. I mean, he was in a class of his own. And yet it still pains me that the Adina stuff is all we've been able to get so far outside of the Inside Moebius books from Dark Horse. No Airtight Garage. Is it Jerry Cornelius? Or is that... No, that's Moorcock. I don't know. I always thought that this Bilal story, the style reminded me more of what's his name? Bilal, isn't it? The guy that did the one with the Egyptian gods coming back, the hunting party, chaos effect. Something about his style was very similar, I thought, at the time. Where's my black and white story? There we go. Found that one. That's the one. A lot of the text is pretty nonsensical, mind you, but there's just these big, huge chunks, and I'll be honest, I'm not reading all that. I don't care what language it's in. The amount of detail that's getting poured into each panel. I always wondered if this was just him goofing around, trying different styles, seeing what worked. But I remember thinking to myself, you don't see artwork like this in American comics. And mind you, at the time, this is the heyday when we first stumbled upon Moebius. This stuff was at the apex of the Image house styles, be it, Extreme Studios, Homage Studios, Top Cow. Everybody had that house style for their little branch. And it was the days of extremeness. So yeah, this was like just such a palate cleanser at the time. And while, finding these in English are a bit pricey, not that there's a ton of text, it's a shame because they're just really cool to look at. And I mean, obviously with the passing of Moebius himself, I feel like his mark upon the comics world may have diminished somewhat, especially in comparison to, a lot of the legends of the field that we still have, thankfully. But, these guys aren't getting much younger. And I always strongly feel that, you can always learn from the past. And there were just so many amazing artists, Moebius being one among many, and one towards the top among them at that. I would definitely recommend, if you haven't ever had a chance to check out his stuff, the World of Adina books, at least I believe, are still in print and should be relatively inexpensive compared to some of these. Unfortunately, a lot of his stuff is still in French. Like, good luck finding any of the Blueberry stuff getting republished. That's a shame. I mean, I know Westerns aren't like the in thing, but it's not like they were the in thing when they were publishing them under the Epic label either. So, or was that NBM? I don't even remember now. I stayed pretty far away from Blueberry just because I wasn't much of a Western fan at the time. But, I've grown to appreciate them in my later years. Hopefully, we'll still see some stuff. I'm not giving up hope just yet. I absolutely would love to see more of Moebius's varied work outside of his Inside Moebius books, outside of his Adina cycles, and more of his just funky, esoteric, crazy, illustrations, because there's just so much out there. So, happy hunting to those of you who are going to be inspired to go digging around for this stuff, and you may still find some of those old epic illustrated graphic novels in the back issue bins. I know they pop up here and there, so good luck to you in that endeavor. With that said, though, this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities in Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we'll see you back here soon. Bye-bye!